All right. So we are here at Progress America Unfiltered with Tyler Brockington and Rhett Martino to talk about current events and all that fun jazz that's going on in Washington, D.C. And when I say fun jazz, I mean not so fun jazz, as we have seen the conservative chaos play out firsthand from the Republican Party in the House of Representatives. So with me, I have Tyler, as I said, who is going to give me the low and high down on what's going on in Capitol Hill. Tyler, what is the tea about this Republican chaos?
Okay, first of all, the low and high down, I'm obsessed. I kind of love that. Okay, so let's get into it. It's a lot of tea. I'm going to try my best to include as much of it as possible. So let's start with the fact that we're starting the 118th Congress. But before we can do anything with that, we have to elect a Speaker of the House. They kind of give the lay of the land, they're in charge of everything. So that's where our journey begins this time last week. So, Trump endorsed Kevin McCarthy, assumed he would be the Speaker of the House, and to a lot of our shock, his first vote failed. Democrat Hakeem Jeffries actually got the most votes for the first 12 ballots, but that's a little bit of foreshadowing. But one thing that you need to know, and one thing that's important to keep in mind throughout all of this, is that when it comes to the Speaker of the House, it's not just about who gets the most votes. It's about getting a majority of the votes. And so because nobody received a majority of the votes after that first vote, they had to keep going. And here's what that means. No one can be sworn in, which means all of the amazing Democrats that we voted for and some of the Republicans, unfortunately, who got the majority were not able to be sworn in. And so all of these families and new representatives who were there and excited to start their first day of work were just kind of sitting there for hours. There was tons of B-roll of born children. There's like Jimmy Gomez with his baby. Even you had representatives like Katie Porter reading the self-help book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a. So basically, it's just hilarity. It's like a scene from The Office where all of these elected representatives are just sitting around waiting to kind of get their jobs started. So here's where it gets a little
Wow.
interesting. Any
I just
thoughts
like,
on that?
yeah, Tyler, like while you're running through this, I'm just thinking like how embarrassing it is for Kevin McCarthy to lose time and time again. And also like for this to go from being one day, somehow that was only a week ago. I feel like we all aged like 50 years in the course of
Yep.
1 week to like voting time and time again, failing all those times until he finally clings on to the speakership. And I just like think about like if I was like a congressional family member going to the Capitol on the day that we were supposed to be sworn in, and I had my outfit all picked out, and then I had to
Yes.
do that again and again and again for the pictures for like when we're finally sworn in. I would be so mad.
Literally, imagine going into your very first day of work and then your boss is just like, okay, well, before you can start working, we have to, vote on who is going to be the secretary of the office. And it turns out you can't do any work. You're just doing a bunch of lunch breaks and basically voting to adjourn, voting to go back home at the end of every single day. That would be a really crappy first week of work. So that said, we at this point we've done a couple votes because they vote a couple times each day. And so, one thing that's important to note is that the block against Kevin McCarthy is really, really strongly coming from the right wing members of the Republican Party, namely one Matt Gaetz, who I just love to crap on because he's a terrible person.
Of
But essentially,
course.
right, who doesn't? There's nothing funnier. I really want to get a screen grab somewhere that we could like pop up. There was nothing funnier than when Gates nominated Donald Trump and was the only person to nominate Donald Trump. So like you're watching C-SPAN and it's like, McCarthy's votes, Hakeem Jeffries votes, and then it's just like Trump won. And I just think
Yeah,
it's
another
hilarious.
election where Trump lost. I mean, it seems like a trend for him, but
We love to
whatever.
see it. And so at this point, we're like multiple votes in. People are just kind of wondering literally what is going on in the House of Commons. That's actually a question that Matt Gaetz, our favorite person to hate, had for AOC. And so there's actually footage of Matt Gaetz like kind of pulling AOC aside and asking her some stuff. And he was basically, it came out later that he was asking her to confirm if like Democrats were gonna work together to like get a moderate Republican nominated for the speakership because obviously Democrats had the votes. And so insert hilarious clip here. Rhett, what are your thoughts on Matt Gaetz?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that it's hysterical that they would go and try to persuade AOC of all Democratic representatives to support a moderate Republican, like that would not happen. Like we saw a complete um, unity between the Democratic Party around Hakeem Jeffries. So to think that they would all like simultaneously jump off of that ship together and go to a moderate Republican, and let's be real, how moderate are the moderate Republicans in the House of Representatives? Not
Totally.
very much so. So it's just like that is
Yeah.
not something um, that we could foresee happening. And I'm really happy that AOC and all of course, the House Democrats stood their ground, showed unity in the face of chaos, and did what the American people sent them to do.
Absolutely. And also, like, as a note, like, AOC is a woman of color. As a woman of color, even though I get that Matt Gaetz didn't want them to do this, it's like, how dare you think we're even going to do your jobs for you? Like, you guys cannot elect a speaker, so you're literally just like hoping that Democrats and, the people of color in the party will like work to,
Like
help
picking
you
up
guys
their
do your job.
pieces.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
exactly.
like they're running to like the teacher or something and just like, will you do my homework for me? No, do your work. Like you guys campaigned for this job. Nobody asked you to run for these jobs. You won the
Yes.
seats. So like now show us, can you govern? Can you do these things? They probably like they can, but honestly, it's like
And
it's
that's not our problem. And that's
yeah,
not our
exactly.
problem. It's your problem.
The campaign for the next election cycle has already started, right? Like we are
Totally.
seeing this, like this chaos is only going to get worse. So what can we do to support candidates that are running in the next election, 2023, 2024, and beyond? Like we are rallying for sure.
Well, speaking of candidates who are running in the next election, we have to talk about the Trump of it all, the elephant in the room, if you will. So, literally, at some point between votes 5 and 15, Marjorie Taylor Greene ends up getting on the phone with Donald Trump very inconspicuously with, big old DT on her phone to make sure everyone can see. And she tries to hand the phone to one of the more radical members of the party, like an anti McCarthy vote, Matt Rosendale from Montana, who is also thinking about running for Senate, I think, in 2024, or is going to run for Senate in 2024. So we've got a former president who's running to be president again in 2024. We've got Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is just ubiquitous, um, kind of trying to like levy each other in this weird standoff negotiation. And then it turns out that Rosendale didn't even take the call from Trump and like very visibly like brushes it off. So like that's a whole thing. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, Tyler, it's really showing like Donald Trump's slip up from the Republican Party. Like the Republicans are
yeah.
not falling in line behind him. We saw that when they didn't support his whatever it was bid for the speakership from Matt Gaetz, but we also saw it when Donald Trump endorsed Kevin McCarthy and the Republicans did not immediately fall in line behind him. So when we think
Totally.
about Donald Trump's grip of the party, it's one that is slipping, and I think that that's something we can watch, like the unraveling that's happening ever so publicly, broadcast from Mar-a-Lago as we head into the next presidential election cycle. Really, we can only like, I don't even think we can predict what the chaos of that is going to look like in its entirety. But I mean, I'm going to be like an avid viewer of it as it unfolds.
Yeah. I mean, it is low key embarrassing that like you are the person who got all of these radicals and these people, quote unquote, like elected into, well, not the quote unquote around people. They are human beings allegedly. But, it's technically, his status that gets all of these radicals elected into Congress, and then they actually have kind of taken the reins. And that's, I think, something to actually be kind of afraid of, in the sense that they have really just given this whole movement new life, and it doesn't rely on the figurehead anymore. Like, he has served his purpose, and I think especially in 2024 we're going to see a lot more people bucking back against him, because the goal is more power, more radicalism, more chaos, and not necessarily Trump forever. And
Of
so yeah, I think that's
course.
pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think continuing on our analogy of like a classroom setting, it's almost like the kids are running the classroom. Like there's nobody that's
Yes.
like serving any sort of like direction for this. And I think that the like kids in this analogy are like those radical members of like political parties, of just people that are seeking office in general. So you think about just like
Yeah.
what that's going to look like in the years ahead. They cut the head off the beast, so to speak, with Donald Trump, and there's just going to be another head growing back. We maybe don't know who that's going to be at this point, but yeah, it's definitely going to be chaotic, and we can only foresee what that's going to with what's going to show us in the times ahead.
So the kids are running the classroom. I kind of love that. I think that's kind of a great title also. Like I think that very like succinctly sums up literally everything that has been going on and that continues to go on. So let's continue pressing on. Believe it or not, they're still voting. Everything we talked about is going on while we're still voting. So now we get to people doing side deals, break after break, day after day. We're on like day 5 finally, and we're coming up on the 14th vote. And Kevin McCarthy tells reporters that he knows he will win the 14th ballot because, quote unquote, I can count. Okay, well, pretty funny. While Kevin McCarthy is counting, out loud to himself, we've got a lot of drama going on, and to be honest, I kind of loved this. It was definitely giving
Hmm.
like dynasty soap opera kind of vibes.
Oh my God,
So
I can hear the backtracks to it too, like just like the intense music. You know what I mean? Like that dun dun dun. Like I think about Keeping
absolutely,
Up with the Kardashians and like that kind of like the backtracks, like where it's like done. You know what I mean? Where they put those
yes.
dramatic sound effects and it's like somebody looks at somebody. Um, yeah,
Actually,
no,
no, that's
that's what it
perfect.
reminds me of.
So the fight in Keeping Up with the Kardashians. This is a big deal. Everyone should know this. This is more important than politics,
I think
actually.
my mind is already there, but
The
okay.
fight between Kim and Courtney. It was
Yep.
like one of the last seasons of their show, and it was like insane, all out brawl. Like these two sisters were really trying to hurt each other. We have to insert a clip. That's almost what we saw on the House floor between representatives. So obviously, Matt Gaetz, especially in the later half of these votes, became pretty much one of the sole holdouts, which is literally annoying. Obviously, I would be annoyed. Republicans started to get really frustrated with him. And at one point, Representative Rogers actually tried to punch Matt Gaetz. There is footage of this, okay? And somebody's like holding him back and grabs him by the mouth or whatever to kind of hold him back. It's just like a whole thing.
The
It's definitely giving
drama.
keeping. Yes, it is giving Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Almost, it almost is giving the scene in early Keeping Up with the Kardashians where Kim tries to hit Chloe with her bag.
Okay, that's where my mind went first. Like
That's
that
a class.
scene, like that was a reset. That was a cultural reset.
Absolutely.
With
Insert
that like
clip here.
huge empty purse. Yeah,
Don't be acting rude.
yeah,
That was
exactly.
basically
Exactly.
Republicans to Matt Gaetz. Which brings us to the 15th and final vote. I don't know about you. I'm literally exhausted, and we haven't even talked about the final vote yet. But spoiler alert, Kevin McCarthy finally wins after 15 votes, 5 days, like 3 packs of Advil for me, hours and hours of C-SPAN being
Yeah, like
played.
caffeine, all of it, like energy bars just through the roof. Like
Now let's talk a little bit about the how. So, how did 15 votes later, Kevin McCarthy get his party to vote for him and make him the speaker? And the answer is it's bad news, is how he did bad things. So let's just start with the biggest one. He made a side deal to give the most right wing extremist members of his party more power in the House. Um, Cut print, like that's the bottom line. The few people who didn't vote for him ended up getting way more power out of this deal than they would have had before. So let's talk about some of the ways that they got this power. Probably the biggest one is the fact that the Freedom Caucus can now stop pretty much any bill from getting to the floor if they don't like it. So that's really exciting. It also takes only one person now in the majority party to like open up. Oh, I always forget what it's called.
motion to vacate.
Thank you. It only takes one person from the majority party to do a motion to vacate for the speaker. Meaning, if he pisses off Matt Gaetz one time or Lauren Boebert one time, they can do a motion to vacate, which would basically start this whole process over again in terms of, it would just kind of be a vote of no confidence in Kevin McCarthy as speaker. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I feel like that might happen more than 15 times. Like I feel like that might be the second time he goes through a 15 vote process over this position.
I hope
Tyler,
not. I
like
really hope not.
as you're unpacking all of that, that really just makes me think about like, is there anything Kevin McCarthy would not sell out to claim onto that gavel? Like he really like if we think about a limbo bar, okay, there's a limbo bar here. He is just like, I'm going lower and lower. I'm gonna do anything to get that gavel, no matter what that is, no matter who he has to sell out, what he has to sell out.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, he wants that gavel more than anything. And as he finally got the votes to become House Speaker, it wasn't like we had like Democrats or moderates shifting over to support him. We saw the extremists were the ones that they got things contended to, so they would support him for that gavel. So we know who he's appealing to. It's not reaching across the aisle, it's reaching further to the right. And who's going to pay for that? The American people.
He really did show that he's willing to shapeshift, lie, cheat, steal, do whatever it takes to get in power. And now it's like, well, what was that for? Because you can only hold it as long as you can keep the babies happy. Like, it literally is just giving people an inch and then taking a mile. And now you're beholden to these people forever. But that's what happens when you make a deal with the devil. So
Yeah, exactly. And now we can all rest assured that no matter what, Kevin McCarthy will have an asterisk in his name in history textbooks that talks about this chaotic process, talks about how he is the least powerful speaker in modern history due to things like the motion to vacate, where he's completely given up his powers. So, I mean, in many ways, he wants the title more than anything. He wants the title more than job security.
now that all that's out the way, what have they been doing? More bad stuff,
Of
if you can believe
course.
it. So this is actually pretty new. We just found this out this morning that House Republicans used their very first vote to gut the IRS funding boost that the IRS got thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act. So basically, Politico reported that Republicans voted to claw back more than 70 billion, or basically 90% of the new funding to the IRS, which basically talks about and echoes their calls to oppose expansion to federal agencies. And it's very interesting that they don't like this one, considering that, tax enforcement and stuff is a pretty big one, especially for their ultra rich donors. So, what this means is basically they're trying to defund the IRS, make it harder for the IRS to um, collect taxes and make it easier for their rich buddies to skip out on paying their fair share, unlike you
Of
or I, who will go to
course.
jail if we do our taxes wrong. So, that's
Of
exciting.
course. Yeah, no, I just think about like the average American family just like sitting over TurboTax, trying to figure it all out, make it all work. And like, meanwhile, we have these Mar-a-Lago politicians, Mar-a-Lago adjacent politicians, just doing anything to cheat their way out of paying their fair share of taxes. And
Absolutely.
also, like, the American people right now are so worried of things like inflation or lowering the cost of everyday items for people across the country. And they did nothing to address that. Like, we
Yeah.
heard about so many people, so many Republicans campaigning on how inflation is kind of the cause of Democratic policies throughout the past few years, but they have done nothing to fix that. I mean, really, it's just like, oh, here's a bad thing. Let's just associate it with the Democrats. But there really is no rhyme or reason to that. And more so, there is no solution being posed by the Republicans. Of course, furthering these tax cuts and these tax cheats for them and their friends is only going to
Yeah.
make this problem worse. And they
And
have not
totally.
proposed a solution.
And let's also be clear, the whole like rhetoric of like, oh, democratic, handouts and et cetera causes inflation. That's literally not true. We live in a society and we live in a global
We live in a
society,
society,
period. Okay,
period.
inflation is a global issue. There's no one democratic policy or any policy in particular that can be pointed towards inflation. So it's literally just fear mongering. But I totally agree with you. You're right that the fact that they've given so much lip service to the cost for American people and the rise in prices that Americans really are facing. And then they made their very first priority to make sure that their besties and their donors get tax cuts and get to exploit tax loopholes as
Yeah,
long as they
exactly.
can. And let's get one thing straight too. Like, we have a Senate and we have a Senate that is controlled by Democrats. Like, this is not gonna stand. But
Of
it is
course.
alarming, and it's kind of like a little yellow warning sign of what's to come, because literally we've had a functioning house for, I don't know, like 48 hours basically, and this is like the first thing that they decide to do. It's kind of a bummer, and it's just really setting up the stage for what we know we're going to see in the coming weeks.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like advice that we would have for the people watching this is just like write your representatives, like write your senators too. Tell your senators to stand up against the things that the Republican Congress is doing. And then write to, of course, your representatives in Congress as well. So, I mean, really, there's like such a good place here for us to activate against these policies. And as we continue to draw attention to this, like we're redirecting our sights on years to come, on advocacy, all of that good stuff to make sure that this Republican House of Representatives is the last one.